What is up, my friends? Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Poffin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Sonia Samtani. Sonia is a speaker, a best-selling author, and a clinical hypnotherapist. She's been successful in resolving deep-rooted issues such as childhood trauma, depression, and limiting beliefs. Sonia was such a blast to have on, and I really want to thank her again for coming on and having this super awesome discussion with me. And yes, I know this episode is a day late again. This week was my birthday week. The boys surprised me with a birthday weekend. We went out for dinner. We went out for dancing. My other buddy took me out to a concert. If you guys know the Arkells, one of the best concerts I've ever been to. So it's been a busy week. I won't lie. I'm on the come down right now. I feel very tired. I feel very drained, but also incredibly grateful just for everyone in my life, for all the support that you guys give me, all the love that I'm feeling. It's been great. So yes, it's a day late. I apologize. We're back on track now. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. We're good to go. Sonia, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
It's a pleasure, Harry. So happy to be here.
So my first question for you, what got you started in the mental health field of work? Like, what inspired you to get there?
I think like many mental health professionals, it was my own story. So I was in a place where when I was a teenager, I was very overweight. I was not confident, did not like who I was. And one of my worst moments and turning points was when I was in McDonald's and I was so scared to order my own meal for fear that I might say something wrong or the wrong way that I kept practicing it in my head. And when the lady then asked me, "What do you want to eat?" I froze. And at that night, I went home and I said, "This does not work." Like this level of self-criticism and overthinking doesn't work. So I decided that I want to change things. I first changed the outside. I lost a lot of weight. I shifted my appearance. That was actually very good. But soon I realized that I was still dependent on external validation. And when I got that, I felt good. And when I didn't get that, I still felt like there was something missing. And that is what really got me started on an inward journey. And I became very curious to understand why. Why do we believe that we're not good enough? Why do we believe that we're not confident enough? Where does all of this come from? And that curiosity took me to books, took me to workshops, took me to education, training. And as I was doing that, I kept working and applying that on myself. And first I went into coaching. Then I went into hypnotherapy. The difference that I found was at that time, back then, coaching was giving me a lot of tools to move forward. And the therapy took me to the root of when I first formed my limiting beliefs. When was that in my life? How old was I? And what I could do to shift them from the seat, from the moment where it started. And then not only was I feeling okay, I was not triggered. I didn't have to look for coping mechanisms because I didn't feel the trigger at all. So that's my inspiration.
Right. Amazing. How hard is it to get to that? I mean, I guess this is a deeper question than just what I'm about to ask, but like, how long did it take for you to finally identify where the root cause was for all these limiting beliefs?
For each one, it takes time. Like I feel like I'm still discovering new beliefs and I'm still discovering places where they came from. But of course, we have core beliefs. And those core beliefs, once I went into therapy, understanding the core beliefs and knowing where it came from, that can take a few sessions. And by few, I mean, let's say 5 sessions. But that those 5 sessions doesn't mean that that's it. You don't need to do any more self-development or self-work. Right. That means that there is a huge layer of your subconscious mind that you have understood. There's a huge layer of emotions that we have processed, and life looks very different. It's like we keep changing our homeostasis.
Mm.
I don't know whether you come across the word homeostasis.
Yeah, I mean, I graduated from science, so I mean, I have a relative idea, but I mean,
Well, it's
it's
just
been a
for
while.
us, yeah, it's about what we consider to be our normal way of being. It means like going back to the original way. So for our heart, we beat a certain amount of times a minute. Our temperature is regulated. And when we get a fever, it goes higher. When we get better, it goes lower because we're homeostatic machines. Similarly, in our subconscious mind, we veer towards the known. Now, the known may not be healthy. The known may be self-sabotaging. The known may be that I don't deserve to be happy. It may be that I'm not as good as other people. I'm inferior, but we'll keep sticking to that until we do enough work to change our homeostasis. So we can go from one kind of normal to a new normal. And that takes about 3 months.
Mm.
And then we kind of plateau until the next sort of evolution of consciousness comes into play and we go, oh, okay, now I've discovered something new about me. And then we're now moving upwards until we go to another homeostatic shift. And so this way we keep sort of like growing and plateauing and growing and plateauing. And that's kind of what's happened to me and what I facilitate.
Right. Interesting. So when you're going through not the plateau but the elevation, like what kind of processes are you doing to get to this elevation?
I do a lot of regression therapy. And regression therapy is basically going back to the past, to the point where the limiting belief was created, or
Mm.
the point where the trauma was created. And the only reason why we visit the past is if it impacts your present. Because, of course, the whole point of living is to be present. And if you are present, that's beautiful. But what if you can't be present? Then we need to look at what is hijacking you from the present moment, what's stopping you. And most of the time, those are traumatic events of the past that trigger you. So with regression work, we look at what parts of the past your consciousness is stuck in
Hmm.
and the parts of your life that have not been processed. And whenever there is any type of trauma, it's as if there's a part of our consciousness that gets frozen in that moment and doesn't grow up. And trauma is very subjective. Trauma doesn't have to be, necessarily the dramatic stuff, which is obviously very traumatic, like rape, sexual abuse, someone passing away. Trauma can also be, I was 3 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night and nobody was around and I felt abandoned. Okay, and the truth is 2 hours later, parents came back from the neighbor's house. But for that 3-year-old, that's trauma.
Right.
So anything like that can produce emotions, thoughts, conclusions. And when we don't process it, there's a part of our consciousness that can get stuck in the past. And when we do regression therapy, we go back in time to retrieve these parts of us, to unfreeze them so that we can process what hasn't been done before.
Right. It's so interesting how quickly trauma can be produced. Like the example you just made, the 3-year-old kid who was abandoned for like 2 minutes, and yet that's still developed a part of their conscious that's frozen. It's so fascinating to me how trauma can come in so many different levels and can be so sudden.
Yes, that is so true. And the impact of that is something that can affect us our entire lives,
Mm.
way into our 60s, 70s, unless we do something about it. And it produces cellular memories.
Right. I mean, if you're just going around and you have this trauma, how do you even identify it? Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who have trauma or have maybe developed it even in the last 2 years, decade, whatever it is, but they just don't even know what it is. So they just think, oh, that's just who I am. Like, how do you even identify that?
Yeah, well, most people identify it when it stops them doing something they want. Like people identify the behavior that they're displaying is not what they want. For example, they don't want to have a panic attack, yet their body is behaving in a certain way. They don't want to be scared of public speaking, yet they can't move forward, they freeze. They don't want to be uncomfortable with authority, yet they feel very uncomfortable. So when we experience the impact of that in our behavior, that gives us the indication that there is something. And then that opens the door to exploration, and that's where we can begin to discover.
Hmm, I see. It, I mean, doing inner work, it's scary. I,
It
I remember doing inner work the first time and I was like, I don't like this at all. I don't feel comfortable. I
is.
don't want to do it. Can we stop? That's,
I know. So many times when I'm with my clients, and part of the process is to face your trauma. And when you're facing it, it's not comfortable. And I know that they're in pain, and I'm making them do exactly the opposite of what they want to do. Yet it's needed, right?
right.
It's what will eventually give them the biggest relief.
Mm.
But I get it. It's not comfortable and it takes something.
When you were going through your own personal healing, when did you start realizing that change was happening?
Again, when I felt differently about the same situations. So let's say if I went out and I was in an event where I didn't know so many people. Previously, I would feel nervous before going in, I'd feel self-conscious. And when I went in without really thinking about, what would people think of me? Oh, okay, that's a shift. I didn't overthink what I was going to say. Oh, that's a shift. I was more present. I was enjoying the moment. So it's kind of becoming present to what are the symptoms of my behavior that are not working for me. Then I'm going to discover the beliefs that are underlying that behavior, shift those beliefs, and then monitor that behavior once again. So it takes a lot of awareness, actually.
Right, no kidding. It takes a lot of living in the present, which a lot of people don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that I facilitate with a lot of my clients, because when they are coming, they come with an objective. And the objective could actually be clarity. It could be, well, I don't know what I want, so the objective is to gain clarity. Or the objective could be something that they do know, where it's, I feel anxious every day. I don't know when, like, let's say in Hong Kong, I don't know when the schools are going to open. I don't know when online schools are going to stop. So I wake up every day and it feels as if something has hit me and I've woken up to a nightmare. How I'd like to feel is calm and accepting. Okay, well, then that objective is already there. And then I look at the symptoms of what they're facing now and look at, well, when we're doing the therapy, what shift is that making to these symptoms? And that way it's easy. When we make it tangible, it's easy to tell the shifts that occur.
Right, absolutely. Nice. That's so fascinating. Now, in terms of, because one of the topics that we talked about before recording that I really was fascinated about were these unwritten rules that you were talking about. How do they compare to the limiting beliefs that we've been talking about?
A lot of these rules create those beliefs. So let's first define these unwritten rules. So rules are kind of conditions that we get from society, from our culture growing up, about the way we are supposed to be.
Hmm.
And so many issues come from that place. So when we're growing up, the stereotypically, it could be that men are not supposed to cry. That's weak. Women are not supposed to show anger. They're supposed to be softer. And so these are all the unwritten rules. And when we are angry as women, oh no, I'm not supposed to show that. Okay, and if I do show anger, that means I'm a bad person. So why am I believing that I'm a bad person? Because I went against the rule.
Hmm.
And so the rules influence the conclusions that we make, and the conclusions that we make then create our belief systems.
Right.
And so a lot of issues that we are, facing in our lives do come from these rules, because we are subjected to rules all around and all the time. I find it very fascinating that if you look at the National Geographic and if you look at animals in the wild, those animals don't really get disease. The
Hmm.
animals that get disease are the ones that are exposed to humans, and the ones that are exposed to rules. Like, this is the confinement of where you can go. Here is where you need to urinate and defecate. Don't bark here. Good boy if you don't bark. So all of these rules that we expose the animals to has them behave like us. So now if I really want to do something, there's a rule against it. I don't do it. And so what happens to that energy is it stays inside the body. We curb it. And over time, it becomes disease. And this is how disease is formed.
Hmm. Like disease of the mind, you mean?
Of the body as well,
Of the body.
because when the body gets tumors and diseases, according to a lot of studies that we have done of the mind and body connection, it's emotional toxicity that has not been processed, that over time leads to body breakdown and physical disease. And why has it not been processed? Many times it's because of these unwritten rules, the rules of I should not talk in this way, I would need to dress a certain way. And it kind of has us think that we can't be the way that we want. Or if we do express what we really want to say, we will then be unlovable. And
Mm,
when we are associating it to being unlovable, we associate it to our self-worth. And then now we link all of those rules to feeling good about ourselves and worthy.
right. Man, yeah, that's what when do these unwritten rules, when do they start to develop?
We're exposed to them our whole lives. The age of life where we're most influenced is 0 to 8.
Mm,
And we are influenced even starting from when we are in our mother's womb. So, age 0, we can pick up things. We pick up things that our mom is feeling. We pick up things that mom is feeling towards us. And we start creating even coping strategies from the womb. Like, for example, if mom doesn't want to be pregnant and she has thoughts of aborting, I have regressed many people back to feeling unwanted and then thinking, okay, my survival is being threatened. What can I do? What can I do? And this good boy syndrome, good girl syndrome has started right from there, needing to please. And so we're exposed to society, environment. I call it the SEER, the SEER conditioning: social, economic, education, religion. And those kind of things give us the rules. And the conduit to that is the family. So our family system exposes us to our environment, to our social environment, our culture, our school, our education, etc. And that's where we get the rules from.
right. That's crazy that you don't like, oh man. So right from the womb, that's it starts so early.
It does. It does. Right from when we are conceived, we start picking up things, and our subconscious mind is a database which stores information. It's storing information as we are growing in our mother's womb.
Right. Now, when something is stored in your mind from that early on, how do you even begin to shift that? Because it's been hardwired forever.
Yes. And this is why shifting things from a subconscious level is so powerful. And this is why I use hypnotherapy as a tool, because hypnotherapy is one of the modalities that bypasses your defenses. It bypasses your filter and it accesses the subconscious mind. And from that space, you can go to the different events in your life, right from age 0, age 1, age 2, and start releasing those emotions that are trapped. And then we can start giving new suggestions with positive affirmations that you are safe, you are loved, you are wanted, there is a place for you, and begin to build self esteem from that place. So it is possible to change your past by changing your perception of the past, because everything is subjective anyway.
Right. Yeah. Now, what if you have a bad memory?
The beauty is, it's not about memory.
Mm,
It's a database. So memory is kind of like your ability to access the database, but the hard disk will still contain the data. So the memory is kind of like our critical filter. And most of us don't remember very early childhood, yet it is in the database of our subconscious mind. And when you're in a hypnotic state, you can access it.
oh, okay. Interesting. Man, so how do you how do you start shifting? I have all these questions about shifting because it's just so fascinating to me. Like when let's say you have an unwritten rule which ultimately turns into a limiting belief and that in turn makes you question your self-worth, your self-acceptance. How can you start to feel that self-acceptance again, or not even again? Like what if you've never felt self-acceptance before? Like how can you even accept that self-acceptance because you've never
Mhm.
accepted it before?
Yeah, and this is why we often work with both the conscious and subconscious mind. The conscious mind is the one that has the rationale, so begins to comprehend concepts like self-acceptance itself is a concept. What does that mean? So self-acceptance means to move beyond judgment, even not to call something good, not to say that something is bad, just to get that it is. I accept you. I have place for you. You're sad. There is place for your sadness. You're feeling unconfident. There's place for you to feel unconfident. I'm not judging it. It's not good. It's not bad. So you're moving out of labeling altogether.
Mm.
And it works for your conscious mind to begin to understand what that means. Because when you do therapy, it's your adult conscious mind that will then give that sense of acceptance to the younger parts of you in the past. So even if you've never felt loved or accepted, it is possible for you to begin to reparent your inner child, your younger self that has never experienced love before. And that's a beautiful thing to do. So if you understand what acceptance is, if you understand that this is just about me making space, this is about me accepting the parts of myself that I judged before. And then you go to the part of you that was bullied in school. And instead of thinking, oh, yeah, they were better than me and I was inferior and my family was not as rich as their family, you look at that younger version of you with compassion, with understanding. You make space for that younger version. You acknowledge their feelings. You give validity to their feelings. And that itself begins the healing. Because once you acknowledge and give space to something, then they can process what's there. And once they process what's there, they can come to a place of peace. So now I'm now given a sense of validation. Somebody is here accepting me. I can now release the feelings of maybe inferiority, helplessness, fear, whatever it is, and I can experience a sense of acceptance by whom? By the adult self that through visualization and guided meditation is viewing their younger self in the past. So this is actually a very beautiful, loving thing that you can do to you, even if you've never experienced it.
Man, that's yeah, no, I actually that sounds very similar to the first time I ever did hypnotherapy. I had a guest on and she offered me a session and we got really deep into because I got bullied a lot in elementary school just because I didn't like what other guys liked. I was into bugs. I was that weird bug kid, and I was kind of overweight and I was picked on a lot for it. But I in that hypnotherapy session, we just got right back to this one scenario that I had forgotten about because, like you said, the memory is just it doesn't hold everything. And I remember we like had me sit down next to young me and just
Mhm.
be like, yeah, you're good, man. Like it like don't hate yourself because other kids don't understand what you're doing. And it the hypnotherapy session was like what, an hour? And
Mm.
right out of that, I felt better than I had felt in a long time because it's that one little piece of or not memory, sorry. It's that one little piece of like trauma that I was still holding on to. It's
Yes.
it's so fascinating.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's exactly how this works. So I'm glad you've actually had a firsthand experience of it. And it's such a loving journey. Earlier on, we were saying that it's uncomfortable, it's scary. The scariest part is to look because you've been avoiding that younger self for so long. And
Mm.
we don't want to go back there because we think it'll make me feel like the weird one again, or it'll make me feel like I'm not as good as other people. But when we go and look, we see a part of ourselves in pain. And that gives an opportunity to love, to heal. And when you're in the midst of it, it's actually really loving and really comfortable. It's just looking at it is the part that we need to get around.
That's the thing. Like for me anyway, it was when we first started, I was uncomfortable because I was like, does this stuff even work? And then when we started discovering that stuff, I was like, this isn't gonna work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to identify where I was bullied again. I don't have to think about this. And then once
Mhm.
we started getting into it, I'm like, this is actually a really nice thing to do. This actually feels pretty freaking good.
Yeah. Exactly. And now that little part of you that was in trauma, the trauma's over. And it's that younger Harry now that can grow up, and you can grow up to the age of today, and you're no longer stuck in that place.
Mm. Now, how do you like, for people who are listening who kind of go like, this is all a bunch of crap, who like, because you can't see it, right? Like, this is a process that's very internal. It's very mental. Well, eventually you can see the process with the people who are doing it because you can notice a change in them. But for people who are so hesitant because they're like, I don't believe in any of that, like, how would how would you try to convince them that this is a legit practice and this is actually very beneficial?
Well, the word convince means that I'm on an opposite side to you. So I want to be on the same side. I
Mm,
would first look at where they are at and where I can relate to them. So if they're at a place where things need to make logical sense, yes, absolutely, I agree, it does. That things need to have evidence, yes, absolutely, it does. So can we then logically understand that when you are bullied and you make a conclusion that I'm inferior, that conclusion can impact your self-esteem? That makes logical sense. Then, if you believe I'm inferior, and if you go to apply for a job, which maybe let's create or name a scenario that's actually happened to somebody, and you are now competing with other people to get it, you might then feel as if they're better than me. Could that make logical sense? Does it make sense that the conclusions that you've made in the past is impacting your present? Oh, yeah. And then I would first go to the events that they do remember. Because if the defenses are high, then we're possibly not going to be accessing the database yet, the deeper parts of it, but we can definitely go to parts that they do remember. And there's going to be a lot of trauma that people do remember too. The
mm,
first ones are the repressed ones. The earliest ones are the repressed ones. The recent ones, people do remember. And if you can think of an event that is recent and still feel upset in your body, then it makes logical sense that the upset is still alive. The event is over, but your upset is not over. Yeah, you can experience that. Okay, let's start there. So when people are more logical, I go logical because it is actually a very logical process. It is not based on things that are intangible. It is studied, it is a science, and it is based on, we can look at the brain waves that are created when we are working with hypnosis. We can look at studies that are cited by so many practitioners and therapists now. But I find that keep it simple is the best, rather than me citing the scientist or Bruce Lipton or this person's experiment or epigenetics. I'd rather just go to talk to them very logically about how they are feeling, why they may be feeling that way. Do they ever remember an event that happened where they were upset in the past? Can they still feel upset about it today? Well, then that's how it works.
mm.
That's how basically I would talk.
Yeah, I mean, you made it so much more simple. I think there's still, I mean, I love how the conversation around hypnotherapy is shifting. I think there's still that idea that it's like in the movies where it's the circus act and you're going like this and it's like, okay, turn into a chicken, and the guy just starts clucking. But I love how it's shifting because I think more people are starting to understand that this is a legit practice and your brain can really benefit from going inward.
Yes, absolutely. And I think people are getting that there's different schools of hypnosis and hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
Hypnosis is when you are not in control and you don't give me permission and it's based on other practices. Hypnotherapy only works if you give me permission, only works if you are willing. And it's a very natural state that we are in minimum twice a day. So every night, just before going to sleep, you're in a hypnotic state where your brain wave is in theta. Every morning, just before you wake up, the same thing. And it happens even at different points during the day where we feel overwhelmed, where there's a lot of impressions on our senses and we feel like I'm not fully alert. We're going into a hypnotic state. The brain wave is changing from beta to alpha to theta, going deeper and deeper. So these things happen, and we're just using a very natural state of mind where your defenses are low. And when your defenses are lower, then you're not going to quip up and say, if somebody says to you, yeah, you can be confident. No, no, I can't. Those are the defense mechanisms. So we're bypassing the defense mechanisms to go deep into the subconscious database to access the memories there, the experiences there. And when we're in that place, we can either place suggestions and say, just simple affirmations like, you are confident, you are lovable, you are accepted, or we can heal trauma from that space and do therapy. And if we're talking about just the suggestion placement, you can do that yourselves. We actually don't even need to go to a professional to do that. We can download something. I've got lots of different meditations. They're all over the internet. Or you can simply, just before sleeping, you know you're already tired, say whatever it is you would love to feel that you don't feel yet. So I feel safe with authority. I feel confident to express my authentic truth. Every day and in every way, I feel more and more comfortable with who I am. Like anything that you would love to feel, keep saying that before going to bed. That's you placing a suggestion in your subconscious mind.
So simple.
Yeah, it can be, yes.
Now, we talked about the inner work. I wanted to go externally a little bit on the unwritten rules thing, because you mentioned that a lot of these unwritten rules are based on like things that you experience with family, religion, economics, environment. Like if we know that these rules, not all of them, but if we know that some of them, like, women can't get angry, men can't cry, things like this, if we're at a point in society now where we kind of know that that's a bunch of, crap.
Mhm.
Like women obviously can get angry and men can obviously cry. Like it's so obvious now to everybody. But why do these unwritten rules still exist if we all know that it's just crap?
The unwritten rules probably exist because the people that are perpetuating that are the ones that have used it as a coping strategy, and it's linked to survival. If I go according to the rule, I'm worthy enough to survive. If I don't adhere to the rule, there's something wrong with me. I may be ostracized, I may be not accepted, and then ultimately it's linked to my survival. So even though I know better, the I know better is at the rational level, and rational level is 10% of our mind. And the subconscious mind, the irrational part of us, is 90% and about 6,000 times more powerful. And that's the part that tends to win.
Right.
And thankfully, we're educating our children in a way that's more conscious. And so maybe now the children are getting a different social economic education and religious inputting. And so they may develop something different and they're not going to adhere to those rules. But those of us that have been brought up previously, in the 80s, 90s, or even before that, we've been exposed to this. And we're still exposed to this. If you watch a movie from the 90s, we'll be exposed to it
Mm.
because these things are all around. Like I was watching a sitcom the other day, and there was a joke around homosexuality. Today, there's no way there's going to be that joke because
No.
people are so accepting towards it. Back then, for men to even, elude that they might not be straight was something to make fun of. So we're exposed by all of these things. And then we link it to our survival. Like, if I'm that means there's something wrong with me. If there's something wrong with me, it means I'm not accepted. I'm not a part of them. That means that I may not survive. That's the reason why we find it so hard to get out of it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've had that before where I'll watch an old movie because as a kid I was always picked on for, like I mentioned, liking bugs, or I liked Disney princesses. Like I liked some girly things as well, and I guess because they're not manly, everyone picked on me for it. But, looking back, you realize like why that belief is in you is because like you watch the movies, you watch the media, and you're like, "Oh, everything that's relatively quote unquote was considered feminine-ish. If it wasn't
Mm.
sports, if it wasn't cars, if it wasn't like the color blue, like all these ridiculous things, then you are, are immediately identified as weak or different, as opposed to like no, you're just you. And
Yeah.
it's so strange how you don't realize it at first, and you grow up and you're like, why do I not accept myself fully? Like, why do I still feel different? And then you go back and you watch everything that influenced you as a kid, and you're like, oh, like I love hip hop. Hip hop is my favorite genre of music. But if you go back to the 90s hip hop, which is great music, by the way, some of the lyrics, like, you wonder why we have like these unwritten rules about, let's say you are, homosexual. Like, some of the lyrics are very against that, and it just makes sense that we have all these limiting beliefs and unwritten rules and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. The exposure is everywhere. And, when you're talking about lyrics, it reminded me as well of, when I do relationship seminars, when we were growing up, we would listen to songs about you complete me and two become one and all of this stuff. And now we know, how can somebody else make you complete?
Right.
Like, it's not the same. And the only thing that will complete you is to integrate the parts of you that were frozen with your own inner children in the trauma of the past. That is why you are not complete, because there's parts of your consciousness that are stuck in the past. And now you are half of what you were. You are a slice of what you are, and you're holding on to a partner to say, please fill in the gap that was created by my own missing parts. You're the one, and I'm going to attach to you so much and make you fit that mold. And when you don't, then there's something wrong with you, there's something wrong with me, and then there's trauma all over again. And we
Right.
do that with relationships. We even do that with objects, with work. It's like we attach to the identity that I am the VP of this company, or with my car, and my car is going to make me feel more complete. We do that with everything, like fill my void. Whereas the only thing, as we said, that will complete you is you. And so now, thankfully, we are getting into a place where relationships are more conscious, where it's like, I'm a work in progress, you're a work in progress. We come together for a shared experience, and we're both retrieving parts of ourselves simultaneously that are out. And we're going to trigger each other, and we're going to push each other's buttons. It's part of the program, it's part of the process, and that's all okay.
Right. That seems a little less toxic than the alternative. You
Yeah,
have to complete me. Like, no pressure.
exactly. And the media and everything else had so much to say about that. And
Right.
the whole happily ever after, really,
Ugh.
does that really exist? I'm doing a lot of work to debunk positive thinking and we should be happy all the time, because it negates the law of duality.
Right.
We are here on earth to experience things, and part of what we experience on earth is duality. And so by virtue of calling something positive, negative has to exist, because otherwise positive has no meaning. If you say happy, you only know that relative to what it's not. And so by labeling anything, you only understand that through its opposite. And so get that it's not possible to only be positive, because you're making sure that the negative exists. So rather than be oscillating between this positive, negative, be an acceptance of both. And if
Mm.
you're an acceptance of both, you're at peace. And then you're probably going to refer to that peace as positive, but it's a very different type of positive, because it's your ability to be with both.
Right. It's the real positive.
It is.
Man, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's so interesting. Now, I wanted to kind of go on, not the relationship side, but also kind of a relationship side, on the topic of, you know, everything, family systems. This is another topic that we mentioned off camera that I was really fascinated about, because I mean, everyone has some sort of family. I mean, whether it's a real, like, your biological family, adopted family, someone you just live with, everyone's got some sort of family system going on. Now, what defines a healthy family system? Like, based on your experience, like, yeah, what is a healthy family system?
Yeah, a healthy family system is something that takes constant awareness and choosing day to day. We can't say, oh, I declare I'm a functional family now. It's not like, you switch a light on and it stays on. in every moment, we need to choose functionality and with awareness and understand what that means. And a few things that indicate that this is a functional, healthy family is when there is acceptance. And acceptance means that each person in the family is valued, valuable. It's not based on hierarchy. It's not based on age. The identity of each person is as worthy as the other. Feedback is given on behavior and not identity. So if something happens, it's not you're an idiot. It's there's a behavior where someone forgot to pay a bill. What happened? There was something that happened, either your state of mind, you were focusing on something else. So let's explore what happened then that led to that behavior. So we're looking at feedback on behavior. We have boundaries and flexibility. A lot of dysfunctional families either have no boundaries or too much boundaries, which leads to rigidity. And no boundaries means that we are basically becoming victims and rescuers and persecutors all around. And we're in drama. So one person is the villain, one person is the victim, and the one person in the family becomes the savior to save the day. You know, and dysfunctional families are created right from the get-go, where, let's say previously, if you were married, a stereotypical family, husband and wife, they don't get along. And then the elders say, well, why don't you have a child? That'll make things better. So now you're creating that the purpose of this child is to fix the marriage of their parents. That's a great sign of a dysfunctional family, because the purpose of the child cannot be to fix my parents' marriage. And so here, again, there's a lack of boundaries. You're placing the child as a rescuer even before the child is born. You have one person that is helpless, one person that is blaming. You go into codependent, counterdependent relationships. And so understanding boundaries is huge. And boundaries is, where do I end and you begin? You know, and when you are looking at homes, there is a wall that separates your home from another person's home. And yet that doesn't mean we can't visit each other's homes. That's flexibility. I know where my boundary is, and yet I can visit you, you can visit me, but we know when it's okay to say no. We know when something doesn't feel aligned with our values. And so all of this is needed in a functional, healthy family. And it needs sort of moment to moment awareness, because in each moment, our boundaries can either be too much, too little. In each moment, we can unconsciously judge or label each other. Yeah.
Right. That baby thing that you mentioned, where it's like, have a baby. It'll help your marriage. I've heard that a lot. And like that's a more common saying than you would think.
Yeah. Even nowadays.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
I have friends who have done that. Like they're in relationships and they're like, this is gonna solve it. No, stop. No, please.
Hmm. Yeah, you're looking externally to solve it. And that baby is going to grow up in a household that is not functional. And over time, they're going to need to address their issues at some point, or they're going to run away into something else. And they can run away into substance abuse, into an affair, into baby number two, you know, and keep
Right.
running from it.
Yeah. Now when you're in a family, sometimes you have, you know, kind of you're in the, when you're in the bubble of that family, you don't really notice if it's like a functional system or a dysfunctional one because you've grown up with it. So you're just like, that's just the way it is. And
Mm.
you know, you're in your own little world, so you just assume other families are like that too, and you don't really question things. So
Yeah.
how can you start to kind of shift from that's just the way it is to, oh no, there's some work here that needs to be done?
If you're aware enough to understand, what place are you saying that's just the way it is from? Are you saying it because you're defeated? Are you saying it because you're feeling helpless? You would love for it to change, but you know it won't. So that's just the way it is. Then, if you are aware enough, you will understand that this is not me being at peace. This is not me being okay. I'm not okay. And if I'm not okay, there is something here that's not working. So self-awareness is the way to discover that. And self-awareness is really checking in. Am I at peace, or am I resisting, deflecting, or running away from something?
Right. Now, how do you get the old guys on board? The older parents and older family members who have never talked about this stuff.
It's through them watching other people in their lives and seeing that it's worked for them. So, my work is about sharing more than convincing anyone. If the elders are in their coping mechanisms and they're comfortable, they're possibly going to stay there for a long time. Because the truth is, people only change when staying the same is too painful.
Hmm.
That's the way that we change through pain. And most people change through pain. Some people change or shift through inspiration. And if you're shifting through inspiration, then it's internal again. It's not someone else convincing you and said, you're not okay and you should be different. That, in fact, that's the most unconvincing thing you can do. When you're doing that, you're blaming them, you're judging them, and what they're going to do in response is probably make their stance even stronger. Because you've attacked them, they're going to be even stronger in the way they are. So I actually don't believe in doing that at all. It's either we wait and we lovingly watch, and something will happen where they will want to shift because being the same is too painful, or share authentically about you and what's working for you, and allow them to see the shifts in you. And when they see that, then they may naturally be inspired to ask questions. And when they ask the questions, that's when you know you have an opening. That's when we can talk. So that is how I would approach the elders.
Ah, that's so smart. That's awesome. Now, I guess, Sonia, my last question for you is, if someone's watching and they're still hesitant to, start that self-acceptance healing, or that, trying to shift those limiting beliefs, unwritten rules, or even on the other side of this conversation, they want to get started on, creating that healthy family system within their own home, but they're all hesitant because, they're questioning whether it's, effective, whether it works, whether they're capable of making it work. What would you want to tell them?
I would want to tell them that if they're interested in shifting, that's a great first step. And they would only be interested in shifting if they see value in it. So something has been said in this conversation that you've seen value in. Understand what that is. And what is it that you could shift that would be valuable to you in your life? Don't believe anything I say. There is no way that you should be or shouldn't be, because those are rules, and rules actually take away self-esteem. So let's get away from the rules and let's go to what's inspired you today. In what way do you think this could add value? Could it add value by you maybe reflecting the rules that you are currently living with, and maybe looking at what do you agree with and what you don't? And that's a great place to start, because there are some rules that you live with that maybe you agree with. We would call those values. And there are some rules that you don't agree with. Those are external shoulds. And if you are living with external shoulds that are not in alignment to you, let's start by giving you choice. It's now your choice. You can choose to live with them. You can choose to drop them. And if you do choose to drop them, see how you feel. See how you feel without being influenced by external shoulds. It might give you a lot of freedom, or you might feel scared that, oh, if I don't do this, for example, the should is I should wake up early, but actually my value is I work great at night. I'm a night person. And it's okay for me to wake up a little bit later, but I should wake up early. And if I'm saying drop that should, maybe you might be scared that I may not get external validation. I may not be accepted. Now look at that. And maybe it might be valuable for you to look at that fear and be able to move through that fear by facing it, doing what I want instead of running away from that fear. Face the fear and do it anyway, and then see how you feel. And you may be pleasantly surprised. Baby steps, one thing at a time, and do what inspires you first.
I love that. Baby steps, baby. Woo. All right, Sonia, my listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
So you can find me on my website, which is actually on my screen. It's allaboutyouscenter.com. My Instagram handle is Sonia Samtani _. My Facebook is All About You Wellness Center, and you can hook me up on any of those. I'd be really happy to hear any questions that you may have. And also on YouTube, if you just search my name, I have a YouTube channel and we've got 1-minute videos there for motivation. And if you like, I can send you a webinar about anxiety.
Awesome. I'll put those links down below. Sonia, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much. Those were great questions. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.